Your writing is terrible. Your intros just don't make sense. And what is it with those conclusions? Well, that is feedback, but it's not very positive feedback to a writer, is it? Well, in today's video, I'm going to share with you some of the tips and some of the strategies I'm using now to give positive and constructive feedback to my team. And I'm seeing some real good success from doing so. So, let's get into this. Hi and welcome back to today's video. Something a little bit different. I've been using a method now for giving feedback to my team. I have a team of around 9 writers, 2 VAs and an editor, and I've started to use this process on a regular basis to actually give some feedback to the people that I'm paying for services, whether that be blog content or whether that be content that I've outsourced to companies. Yes, I give feedback to companies as well as individual team members, and I'm seeing some real good success from doing so. Now, you may be like many people out there, you hate giving feedback. Even positive feedback can sometimes be very difficult to actually give. And I found it a process that I struggled with many years ago, but I'm actually getting a lot better at it now. When I worked at a previous company, my corporate job, I had to give regular feedback to my team members, and I too also received feedback. And I learned some valuable lessons through those companies that I worked for. One in particular really stuck out in my mind, where I used to have regular monthly feedback sessions. Now, in the beginning, I hated those. I dreaded going into those meetings because I always felt like it was a personal attack on me. They were always criticizing me. It was never constructive or positive. But actually, after a few months of having them, I realised they was actually really helpful and it was very constructive. It was just me putting up a brick wall of negativity and not actually listening to what they said. All I saw was attack, 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 when it actually wasn't like that. Now, there are a few reasons why I eventually took some positivity out of those meetings, and I will cover those in just a second. But how is this important to you? Well, if you are outsourcing content and you're not getting content back that you believe is exactly as you like, then you may have to give some feedback, and it will be beneficial in the end for you and for that writer. But it's how and when you give that feedback that is important, and the way you go about it will determine the success you have from actually giving the feedback. And as I say, I have seen some outstanding improvements in some of the work that I am receiving back. Now, this is not all written blog posts. It may be some technical work I'm having done on a website. It may be a service that I'm using that I've given some feedback to. It doesn't have to necessarily be just to your writers. But if you are building a team, or you've hired your first writer, or you've outsourced your first piece of content, giving actual feedback can really improve the quality of the work that you're getting. And after all, you are paying for that service, so you do want to ensure that you get your money's worth and you get exactly what you thought you was going to get. So here's a few tips and processes that I'm using to give feedback to my team members. So number 1, motives. Think about why you are giving that feedback. What is your motive? What is your reasoning for giving them the feedback? If it's because their quality of work isn't right, then again, you may need to structure the feedback in a certain way. If you're giving feedback because they've done some great work, or you've seen some things that have really improved in their work, again, that might determine how you give that feedback. But always remember, just before you send that feedback, whether it be in an email or you giving that feedback in person, just think about why you are giving that feedback. What's the outcome? What are your reasonings for it? And what are you expecting to see or change after you've given that feedback? And number 2, a timely manner. Make sure if you're giving feedback that is current and in the moment. There is no point giving feedback to something that's happened months ago, because it may not be warmly received. They'll instantly put up a brick wall and think to themselves, why didn't you tell me this months ago? I could have saved myself so much trouble. Actually giving the feedback for relevant and recent work is the best way you can do it. So do it in a timely manner so that it seems relevant to them. It's fresh in their mind. They can remember what they've done, because if you're giving feedback for something that was happened months ago, they might even not remember what you're actually talking about. So do it on relevant and recent work. And number 3, regular and consistent. So there are two parts to this. Well, regular, I would suggest giving feedback on a regular basis. Now, it doesn't have to be daily or weekly. It could be quarterly, every 3 months, or at the end of every month if you've got a slightly bigger team. But giving that feedback regularly will ensure them that this isn't a one-off attack. This isn't a one-off telling off. This is something you do on a regular basis so that you can grow and learn together. They can improve the service they're giving you, and you will improve on how you're giving your feedback. If it's done regularly, it'll be more warmly received because you'll expect end of every month, Cal gives me some feedback, might be positive, might be slightly negative. I don't like negative, let's say slightly constructive, but it will be regular and he does it on a consistent basis. And then consistency is the second part of this. Again, now I'm not meaning consistency on doing it every month. I mean consistency for the type of feedback you're giving. So don't tell them in one feedback to change something, and then in the next feedback, tell them to change it to something different. You need to be consistent on what you're telling them, because otherwise they'll say, wait a minute, you told me to do it this way last month, and now you want me to do it this way. Make up your mind, Carl, and make sure that the feedback you give is on a consistent format. They will then understand what you expect and they can learn to change their process to suit yours. Because after all, what they're doing for other people may be warmly received, but if they do the same for you, you might not warmly receive that. So you need to make sure you are consistent with your expectations. And number 4, specific and focus. So you need to give feedback that is very specific. There is no point saying things like, I don't like your intros, you waffle on in your conclusions. You need to tell them what is wrong with their intro and their conclusion. Show them some examples. Show them what they've done that you didn't like. Be specific in the feedback you give so then they can change their approach to the writing or services that they give you. And that often means you can focus down on it. So rather than say, I didn't like that 2,000 words you wrote, tell them why you didn't like it. Give them specific examples. Maybe they haven't answered a snippet for you. Maybe they didn't include some H2 headings. Tell them, give them that focused and specific feedback so they can change the way they work for you. And number 5, privately. Whatever you do, make sure you give your feedback privately, individually, and direct to that one person. If you have a team of writers, like say I have 9 writers on my team at the moment, don't give or single out one person to the whole team. There is nothing worse than getting feedback, especially negative feedback, in a group situation. Don't copy everybody into an email and individually pick out one person. Hey, Julie, I didn't like that article you wrote last week. It was rubbish. Don't do that. Give that feedback, constructive feedback, to that person privately and individually. However, if it is a success, you can share it with everybody. And I'm happy to do that with my team and say, hey, thanks for the work last week, team. However, I'm going to focus and pick out on Julie. She did some amazing work last week and I really appreciate all of you, but specifically her work really stood out to me. So thank you very much, Julie. You've done a wonderful job. I'm happy giving individual positive feedback, but if it's on a negative or on a constructive manner, then it would need to be done privately. Again, in my corporate job, I've had situations where I've been in a group of 20 people in a circle and I have been picked out, pointed at, shouted at, and basically ridiculed for some work that I did. It wasn't pleasant. It stuck with me in my mind. And I, from then on, had that brick wall mentality of I'm not listening to you every time they spoke to me. So don't do that to your team, your writers, or the companies you outsource to. Make sure you do that in a private manner. And finally, the number 1 rule you need to do is follow up on feedback. So if you've given this feedback, whether it be positive or negative, you need to make sure a few weeks or a month or so later, you pick up and follow up on it. So if you've asked Julie, and by the way, Julie's a made-up name, she's my writer. If you've asked Julie to actually improve her intros and her conclusions, then check them, and if she's improved and she's trying her best, give her that follow-up feedback. Just say, hey Julie, after last month's feedback, I can see you've worked really hard on improving your intros and your conclusions, and you're doing a wonderful job. Or you may say to her, you've tried your best to improve and follow up on that feedback, however, we're still not hitting the mark, and then give them specific focused feedback again so they can continue to try and improve. So just remember, guys, it is a business you are running. I know it is a very raw subject, is feedback, and a lot of people do struggle to receive it and to give it. But it is part of being in business, and it is only beneficial if it's done in the right way. So hopefully you might find some of these tips helpful, and you may be able to give your writers or your team a little bit of constructive and positive feedback. Done in the right way and in a timely manner, it can really help improve their performance. So thanks for joining me in today's video. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, click the like button, and let me know in the comments, do you give feedback for services that you pay for? Do you give your writers feedback? And maybe, does anybody give you feedback? That's one to think about. But for now, thanks for joining me in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.